And now, much to get to. First up tonight, the shepherd of the Diocese of Albany, his strong response to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's support for radically expanding the abortion laws in that state made headlines. Here to tell us how he thinks the church needs to respond to Cuomo's recent actions is Bishop Edward Scharfenberger. He joins us now from Albany. Your Excellency, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
There are many people who are calling for Governor Cuomo to be excommunicated. Now, you have said you support that, but would use it as a last resort. When is it appropriate or necessary to publicly excommunicate a public official like this?
Well, of course, there are different reasons why this particular sanction might be used. And as you said correctly, Raymond, it's a last resort where nothing else can be done. First of all, to persuade the person that has removed themselves so far from the communion of the church. And the hope, of course, is to persuade them to come back once they've distanced themselves. You know, I've heard people say, in a sense, a person excommunicates themselves. And while that's not technically true, so many of the things that Governor Cuomo has done, and in my view, unnecessarily so, running a victory dance around something that I think the vast majority of the public see as not a good thing. I mean, some people may take a position that the freedom should be there to do this, but I think he completely misread how people are seeing this. So he's kind of embarrassed himself. He's kind of isolated himself, in my view. So do I need to add insult to injury? Who needs to know that what he's done is an embarrassment to the Catholic community, an embarrassment to many people of good conscience? So piling on like that, quite frankly, one of my reasons for I'm not hesitant at all. I mean, we can do this, and I think we have reason to do this, but what good would come from this when in fact he's doing a better job than, and I hate to say it this way, than I could in isolating himself from his Catholic beliefs and from, I even think, the behavior you would expect from a statesman.
I want to play this for you. On his Sirius XM show this week, Cardinal Dolans of New York City had this to say in reaction to fellow Catholics talking about excommunicating Governor Cuomo. Listen.
What are you all looking at Daddy here? You better do something. You do something, okay? I don't have much clout. Some fat, balding Irish bishop talking about defending the church and talking about how hideous this abortion bill is. They're going to say, ho-hum, they have to feel that way. You get committed, thoughtful, compelling lay people who are speaking up. They got votes, folks.
What do you make of the Cardinal's comments there? I mean, who else has clout if not the bishop? Excellency.
Yeah, I know different bishops have said different things. Cardinal Dolans has expressed his way of saying it. I know Bishop DiMarzio has said that he feels that if an excommunication took place, that the governor would wear it as a badge of honor, feeling that he was bullied. I leave that up to every individual bishop to say. I know Cardinal Dolans has been asked what he would do. He lives in his diocese. People have asked me whether I could excommunicate the governor. If we can make out that in fact what he did was what we call in canon law a delict or a crime, I would have the jurisdiction to do that. But I frankly think that focusing on punishment, and particularly when excommunication is not meant to do that, but meant to bring a person back. What I am more concerned about is, Governor Cuomo has drunk the grape drink and in a form has perpetrated this, I think, cancerous ideology that somehow or other it is a good thing for a woman to be able to destroy her own child. I don't think anybody really believes that. And I'm sure those even that voted for the bill would like to downplay that element of it, But here's the thing. I think that one of the things we really have to have a conversation on nationally is not only what exactly abortion is, but and I can't think of saying it any other way, but a deception to think that somehow or other this advances the freedom and rights of women. And that is, of course, something I can't say in one soundbite. But I have a lot of questions about that. And I think, in many ways, second wave feminism has missed the boat on linking somehow the whatever you would call it, the freedom to abort your own child, as somehow advancing your interest as a woman or as a human being.
Bishop, have you already had a conversation with Governor Cuomo about his actions? I mean, what role does a public scandal play in all this? Doesn't a public scandal, an act like this, require a public correction of some kind?
Eventually, it does. And I think that if my statements up to this point have not adequately made that clear, I will continue to make that clear in a very public way. But conversations, yes, bishops typically, including myself, do have conversations with political leaders. We tend not to advertise that or to make that public or to speak about with whom we met and when we did. And there's a reason for that. I want to be able to open up the opportunity for anybody who wants to speak with me as a pastor and not to feel that, that there's a public eye on them. Now, if it may come that I may have to say something public, I may have to say that, yes, I have warned somebody if it's a negative, if it takes on a negative tone. But I generally don't discuss those conversations other than to say that I do have them.
Yeah, the last public excommunication actually took place where I am right now in 1962 in New Orleans, when Archbishop Joseph Rummel excommunicated three Catholic leaders here for blocking his efforts to desegregate the Catholic schools. Why haven't we seen excommunications of politicians who advance something as heinous as abortion? I mean, this is much worse than blocking children from getting to school. It's wanting to liquidate them.
Yeah, and I don't know, because those decisions are made by individual bishops, Raymond. It's not, as you know, the bishops of the United States, we're not like the Senate, or Congress, whereby we can come together and issue a lot of time. For example, people have said they would like the bishops of New York State to, to put some sanctions on Governor Cuomo. And not only Governor Cuomo, by the way, but even those legislators that voted for the bill. So I've gotten all sorts of questions. But we don't act in concert, like as a concerted body, in a group. Each bishop is responsible for the spiritual care in his own diocese. And it's up to him to decide whether, if he uses this sanction, that this will be for the good of, obviously, the individual who is sanctioned, but also for the community. He also has to take into account the consequences in singling out an individual, because it will also perhaps set some sort of a standard that others similarly situated should also be treated the same way. We have to be fair about that. And I've heard those who have said to me, and I don't know whether I agree with this, but that those that actually voted for the legislation in some ways actually are just as responsible, if not even more responsible, than the governor who signed it. I realize his despicable behavior, parading the city around in pink lights, has really annoyed a lot of people. And it is, I understand that. But in terms of what actually made this legislation happen, and that having been said, Raymond, we also have to take very seriously the power of our votes, because we need to know where our representatives stand on issues and to make known how we stand. And I think going forward, we're going to have to do a much more effective job at that.
Isn't there a canon, very quickly, Bishop, where a bishop has to also protect the sacredness of the sacrament, protect the sacrament itself?
Oh, yes.
And by allowing a public figure who is manifestly dug in and said, I disagree with the church and I'm still a Catholic, to go forward and take that sacrament, isn't that a sacrilege?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the bishop is responsible for preserving the integrity and the sacredness of the sacramental life of the church. That is definitely there. Now, we do have a canon, as you know, that has been quoted much, Canon 915, which specifically says, without actually the need for a specific sanction, that anybody who has so publicly and persistently and obstinately persisted in promoting something that is clearly against the fundamental teaching of the church, as Governor Cuomo has done and some other politicians, should not receive Holy Communion. So that's clear, nor should that be administered to that person. And of course, I made that very, very public, and my clergy are aware of that. I understand that Governor Cuomo does not actually present himself for communion, and his father didn't either, incidentally, even though he was a daily mass attendant. So that is one canon there. And then ultimately, it would be up to my judgment, or Cardinal Dolan, if you so choose, to decide whether or not it's gotten to a point where something more severe has to be done. But of course, that's not going to solve the problem that we have in our society of this noxious ideology that continues to, as we see in a copycat legislation outside of New York.
Right.
It's not just limited to New York. So this is something that has national implications.
No, now it's Virginia. It's Rhode Island, it's Virginia, it's spreading everywhere. In fact, I'm going to play you. This is a clip of the governor of Virginia the other day who, has caused social media to explode, explaining his defense of a bill that would allow abortion right up until birth and maybe afterward. Listen.
If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
Are you disturbed by this trend we're seeing, by this idea coming from duly elected politicians and those responsible for states?
I think every person of good conscience would be disturbed by that. This is not just a Catholic issue or even a Christian issue. I know atheists against abortion, too, who believe that there is a humanity in an unborn life. The humanity of the unborn life, that is something that needs to be respected. And obviously, laws like the one in Virginia clearly don't. And the law in New York State, which removes the former practices whereby a physician would be present at the time of a late-term abortion or even an earlier-term abortion, just if the fetus was viable, to be sure that if the fetus was viable, that it would be tended to. But now that protection is completely removed, and from the legislation that the governor was quoted to have cited, you can see that not only is that protection removed, but the odds are very, very much against the survival even of a viable live birth. It's grisly. I mean, that shocks the conscience. I mean, that is not that's not America, and it should not be.
Does it? The very idea, though, Bishop, that you have Catholics, and I'm going to play Governor Cuomo here for you just for a moment. Here he is talking about his faith. Again, the Catholic, he likes to mention his Catholicism, and no doubt that helps him come election time. Watch this.
I'm a former altar boy, and my relationship with the church is important to me, and I've found the differences painful over the years.
He says the church has been against him on things like gay marriage and reproductive rights. How do you respond to that? And does the church have a job to educate its members and make them aware of what their public responsibilities are as public officials?
The answer to your second question first. Yes, the church has an obligation to educate, I think, not only its own members, but also the general public so that they understand really where we stand and why we do. So that's number one. Number two, what Governor Cuomo, there are a lot of good Catholics that have differences of opinion about certain things the church does, and even what the church teaches. But this is something very, very different. What Governor Cuomo is doing is he's taking positions and issues that are fundamentally, certainly the sanctity of life, fundamentally against the very core of what Jesus Christ was all about and what the church teaches and what Pope Francis consistently teaches. To be charitable, it's another form of cafeteria Catholicism, whereby you believe that to be a member of the church is like walking into a cafeteria deciding what you want to eat and what you don't. And I don't think any faith can possibly have much integrity if they have no fundamental principles. And the sanctity of life is a fundamental principle of our faith, our belief. But as I said, not only of Catholics, this is something that many people who are not even theists believe that somehow or other. I mean, our ancestors, the American Indians, believed in the sacredness and sanctity of life, even though they were not mostly Christian. But they had this fundamental respect for nature, for God, for life. And I don't want to speak, for that community, but I think that many people of different cultures have a fundamental respect for life, and particularly in its most vulnerable stages, innocent human life.
Bishop Edward Scharfenberger of Albany, thank you so much for being here. Thank you also for your candor and your engagement. It's great to see.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.